Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Refugee Matters. My name is Isabel Lopez. I'm We Are All America's Digital and Narrative Manager, and I'm your host for this episode, where we're going to be diving into the legal limbo and the uncertainty of temporary protected status in the US. TPS was created in the 1990s through the Immigration Act of 1990 as a statutory framework to provide humanitarian relief to people escaping wars, natural disaster, or otherwise volatile conditions. This was a bipartisan effort driven by Congressman Joe Moakley and Senator Edward Kennedy, who were seeking to protect around 500,000 undocumented Salvadorans is fleeing a brutal civil war in the 1980s, and the legislation was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush. How TPS works is that the Secretary of Homeland Security has the authority to designate a country for TPS if it meets specific criteria: ongoing armed conflict, such as civil wars, environmental disasters like earthquakes or hurricanes, or other extraordinary and temporary conditions that make returning unsafe. And recipients are granted a temporary stay of deportation and a work permit, usually for periods of 6 up to 18 months. As of 2026, there are approximately 1.3 million people with TPS living in the United States. And while 18 countries have received designation since the program's inception, the vast majority of beneficiaries come from Venezuela, Haiti, El Salvador, Ukraine, and Honduras. Since the start of the second Trump administration, the program has entered a period of significant volatility. The administration has moved to terminate TPS status for 13 out of the 18 designated countries. And as of April 2026, many of these terminations are frozen due to federal court orders. So today, we will be talking about what this limbo looks like for our communities in the day-to-day, how organizations and groups led by directly impacted community members are organizing and resisting, and about what the path forward looks like for the future of TPS. So without further ado, I will introduce our guests for this episode. I'll turn it over to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Isabel. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Patrick Delaney. I'm the Federal Policy Advisor with CASA. We Are CASA, and We Are CASA is a membership-based organization, right? We have offices in Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, and Georgia, and we have over 190 lifetime members across the United States, right? 46 states. We're a national powerhouse organization working on building power and improving the quality of life in working class, Black, Latino, Latina, Latin, Afro-descendant, Indigenous, and immigrant communities. We create change through our unique power blending model, right? We mix human services with community organizing and advocacy to really work towards serving the full spectrum of need of our members and working towards achieving the dreams and aspirations of our members, right? We have community leadership boards that decide on their priorities at the state, local, and federal level, and we work with them in mobilizing, organizing, and working towards securing victories for them, right? We're talking about things as tenant protections, immigration protections, access to medical care, right? All the everyday needs of our community members, ensuring that they can live a full and joyful life as they're here in the US, as well as working at the federal level to secure the protections they need and securing the pathways to work authorizations and such at that level as well. It's really a powerful moment to be here and working in these things, but we keep on fighting through.
Hey, Patrick, good to see you. It's amazing to share the space with you and Isabel discussing GPS. My name is Yanira Arias. I am the engagement and advocacy organizer at Las Americas. It's been around for over 20 years. It is a national network of immigrant-led organizations. Our mission is to create an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable way of life for immigrants, communities living in the United States and across the Americas. Meaning that we always keep our hearts in our countries of origins and how we can influence as diaspora to improve the quality of life in our countries as well. So we're committed to empowering community leaders, government agencies, labor organizers, and faith-based communities to work transnationally to provide a more dignified and just way of life for all persons in the Americas. At the end of 2019, Alianza Americas were adopted as strategic pillars, and those have been very important for us, not only for the purposes of working internally with the staff, but also it's the vehicle, how we communicate and how we actively work with our more than 55 organizational members across the United States. Equity is one of first pillars, addressing inequities by proposing inclusive, equitable, and sustainable solutions to the many challenges we face. Democracy, defend and promote innovative and effective democratic practices. Narratives is our third pillar. Co-create our own narratives as migrants that tell the stories and advance our vision for a better future. And last but not least, immigration, to defend human rights and the right to mobility. To end my introductions, I would love to say that I am as well an immigrant from El Salvador. I am a current TPS holder from El Salvador. I've been living with the status since 2001.
Thank you both so much for your time and for joining us for this important conversation. And I want us to dive right in. From what you're hearing from communities on the ground and from your own lived experience as well, what does it actually look like to live under TPS for years, even decades, with no path forward? What kind of toll does that uncertainty take?
I can start quickly to say that as a TPS holder myself, planning for temporary blocks of time, it creates a lot of uncertainty. And I can see it as well with TPS families. It's different when you are one individual, but once you have families, children, significant others, it's not only planning for yourself. That plans are impacted as well in your families. The uncertainty of not knowing if employment will continue to be available, if the means of income will continue to be there, not only to provide for our families in the United States, but in our countries of origin. The uncertainty of navigating the complex immigration policies. As you mentioned, Isabel, the TPS program was created in the 1990s, but without a clear opportunity of, uh, without a flexible opportunity to transition to permanent residency. Not everyone can do that. So that not only increases to the stress and for families to not knowing if what we have right now we will continue to build together a better future. And the last thing I'm going to say is this uncertainty increases by knowing what's going on in our countries of origin. um, Things have not improved, at least poverty in El Salvador has increased. Evidence of that, an indicator, is that remittances to Central America, it's more than $5 billion a year combined with other Central American countries. So there is a huge need for our families not only to receive our solidarity in the means of remittances, but also as a TPS holder myself, I can say that my hopes after almost 30 years is that Congress allow us via a legislation the opportunity to permanently be protected. Um, and of course to continue to use the program, although it's been known as temporary, but it's been a relief, it's been a blessing for every country which has been designated the relief.
Yeah, I think Guinea paints it quite well, right? There is this the hardships that we deal with every day, right? Putting food on the table for family members, worrying about kids getting to school, worrying about aging parents, right? All these things that we all deal with daily right now, added with this additional level of insecurity, of uncertainty, right? The unknownness of how much longer does this status last for me? What does this mean if I lose this status? What does this mean for my kids? What does this mean for my job? Right? There's all these uncertainties that get stacked onto each other on top of just the normal hardships of life, right? All that to say that there's still people who are living in joy and resistance in that, right? In this moment. We never want to minimize that, right? That folks are still showing up in their community, showing up for their families, friends, and loved ones. But it is with this additional burden on their lives that they have to figure out what comes next, right? And as people navigate that, it's not an easy thing to navigate, right? Because the uncertainty of TPS, the complication of the U.S. immigration system, right? The concerns for home country, right? For family members who maybe still be stuck in these conditions that are why people can't return back home, right? There's all these layers that are just stacked onto each other daily, and that's been the reality for folks, right? As mentioned, right? This is something that's been going on for some of these countries, for folks in some of these countries for over 20 years, right? That's the true reality for folks of every 18 months or so, right? Saying what comes next for me? Do I have to figure out my life in the next few months and figure out where it comes next, right? Or do I keep on trying to plan here for the next 5 years, right? Or the next 10 years? Like this has been a reality for folks, and now that reality is quickly changed, right? We saw the initial attacks in the first Trump administration, and now the attacks have escalated under the second Trump administration to a very different type of existence for folks as the program is coming to an end in many ways in this moment, right? And a lot of the terminations are affecting folks, like I said, who've been here for decades. And how do we now people adjust in this moment to confronting that reality as they're still making the efforts to fight back at the courts or in all the other ways to ensure that the worst case scenario is not what they confront.
And on the topic of all these terminations, Patrick, I feel like there's a lot of jargon around TPS. We're seeing terminations get blocked, appeal, stayed, and it's a lot moving very quickly. So for someone that doesn't have a legal background, can you explain what all of this actually means for their TPS status on any given day? And now that even the Supreme Court is weighing on whether TPS decisions should be reviewable by courts at all, what happens with that back and forth if the administration wins? Is there even going to be a legal lifeline left for TPS holders?
Yeah, 100%. It's complicated, right? As we work with anything in immigration law in the U.S., it's always much more complicated than we ever think it should be. As mentioned, there are, as of a few weeks ago, before the Supreme Court, there was 2 cases regarding TPS for Haiti and Syria, right? Countries that have had extensions come up under the Biden administration and the Trump administration that tried to cancel. And this whole legal battle was about the term in which the extent that the current administration went into like saying that they don't need to extend the TPS designation, right? TPS designation, as I think you mentioned at the top, is like about the conditions in that country, right? Whether there's a conflict, a natural disaster, right? It's the idea that it's unsafe for folks to return home in this moment. And because of that, to keep people safe, right? They have this temporary protection from deportation, this work authorization, right? Core of these legal challenges of like the 13 countries that have been 13 out of the 17 countries that have been terminated under the Trump administration is this idea. There's a question about the extent at which the administration is really checking in on the conditions in these countries about how safe it is for folks, right? That's a large issue at a lot of these legal cases for these 13 countries. And there's some other issues in some of these cases about racial animus, right, and stuff like that, of comments made by the administration against immigrants, right? So these are the pending issues at large about how much review does the government have, does judges have in the court system of the government's decision to say, you know what, we think everything's fine in Haiti, in Syria, in Honduras, in Nepal, in Cameroon, and people should be able to return back, right? So there's this whole process now between the courts of this trying to figure out, is that truly the case? How much of we can say the government is doing their job appropriately or not, right? And what that means is at the moment is that various legal places of the different cases of the different countries are in different states, right? Some folks have some extensions or their terminations have been put on pause, so they might have some status. Other folks' terminations are still in legal court cases and trying to figure out what exactly the government can and can't do, but their terminations are still going through, so they have lost status, right? This is a really complicated space where there's no consistency, right? Like we talked about, there's already the uncertainty of when my status of TPS will end, right? When would that designation come to the end? And now we're working with judges issuing different levels of orders on some people can have status still, other countries may not, right? There's these inconsistencies from country to country about what that practicality is of if folks have status or not. So it may be the case that a country in this moment doesn't have status because a lower court decided we're gonna say something's at issue here, that like maybe the termination wasn't the case, right? And we're gonna put a pause, and then the government appeals to the higher court. And while that is being appealed, the higher court says, we'll keep the termination, the pause on the termination not to be the case. So people will lose their status. But it may be in a month or so, the appeals court will say, actually, we made a mistake. We're going to pause the termination yet again. And maybe folks might regain some sort of status, right? So there's really this question of what happens with folks who lost their status for those 3 or 4 months, who then the judge later down the road says, actually, we're going to pause that termination starting now. Like, where is the place of this, again, this legal limbo as we talk about, right? This unknownness about what people can plan for, can account for in this moment. That's a really frustrating thing, right? And this has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court, right? This question about how much overview does the government have over, do judges have over the government's decisions and TPS designations, right? And again, we're waiting. There's a lot of waiting games, unfortunately. And while we're waiting, people are living with that uncertainty, right? There's still no decision. There's no limited protections. There's literally limited resources for folks to relief to secure for knowing what comes next for them in the moment.
Yanira, one of the things that you were mentioning is how TPS terminations are not just affecting communities here in the United States, but also in their home countries. You mentioned remittances going down across Central America, across the board. But I want to ask you, when these terminations are announced, what else happens on both sides of the equation? What are you hearing from communities in Venezuela, El Salvador, and Honduras about what it would mean for people to be forced to act?
The first thing is confusion. It's a lot of questions. For example, what Patrick was just sharing, it's not easy to digest all of what it means, the role of the district courts, the role of the Supreme Court, was the role of the government, and understanding as well that in all of this, Congress creates laws in order to make sure there is a balance in the use of power by the government. And these are the many questions people have right now. Not only why the government is making these unfair decisions, knowing the conditions in the country, in all of the countries under TPS cancellations and those on hold thanks to the litigation. So they wonder why the government is doing this. But also, what's going to happen with my loved ones if they return to the countries and none of the governments are ready with not only with the infrastructure, but we're talking about that people have spent, as Patrick said, decades in the United States. I was 27 at the time I was designated with TPS. I'm 54 almost now. So I'm one of the youngest of the generations of TPS holders. The majority are older, 60 and up. So governments are struggling right now in the region how to better take care of elderly people, not only with housing, quality healthcare programs, keeping the lives of their elders in a very dignified way. So TPS holders here right now wondering, am I gonna be able to go by if I am sent back, if I am forced? It's not that I'm deciding just in without getting all of this pressure of being denied access to a work permit, being denied access to healthcare. We're seeing how many changes to essential services are happening because of the administration. It's making those measures to desperate people, to force them to leave. So it is the questions asked, not only about understanding the process, what are the options? Is there going to be, as Patrick was mentioning, the scenarios, but within the scenario, between those scenarios, what's going to happen with my family, with my loved ones? So all of that, and in addition, because of these chaos that is intentionally being created by the administration, unfortunately, there are as well people who is praying after the desperation of TPS holders seeking legal support. We are seeing the increase of notario fraud and people who are saying they are lawyers and without caring about the dignity of these families. They are taking away not only money but impacting, affecting the possibilities of these TPS holder and their family to really find a legal relief. So we're seeing that not only across the country in the United States, scams against TPS holders, but also that the absence of enough legal resources, because agencies are at capacity right now, assisting many other immigrants who are trying to find a solution to stay, to keep their families together. So finding a spot, an appointment with someone who really has the capacity to tell you what are the options right now, it's also a matter of time for many TPS families in the United States. And the last thing I'm going to say is that Alianza Americas, as I said, is comprised by 55 organizations. 15 of them were part of the efforts that ended in the birth of TPS. So they have been working closely with the TPS community since the 90s. And what we're seeing is different, although the questions and the resources our organizations are putting together, it is difficult right now because of the harassment that the administration is conducting against TPS holders. So people it's living under a lot of fear. So regardless of how much resources and educational spaces and spaces for support are created by local groups, TPS holders are afraid to go out. And that limits the possibilities of not only providing the right information, but saying, I'm here for you. And providing that sense of, we are here for you and we're going to fight together along the way, and try to find a solution.
Thank you for the reminder, Janita, of what communities are doing and staying together, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I wanna switch gears to bring our attention back to communities in the U.S. and what they're going through with this legal limbo of uncertainty. So, Patrick, I know that CASA serves a lot of the communities most directly affected by these terminations. Can you share more about what you're seeing in terms of the immediate practical impact in people's day-to-day lives, their jobs, their kids' schools, or even their willingness to access services right now?
Yeah, 100%. I think we've heard a little bit about it, right? For folks who have lost status, right, or in the process of losing status, right, there's now just additional concerns on top of the ramping up enforcement that we've seen under this administration, right? We've seen how immigration legal enforcement agents have been in communities, right? The violence that has led to, the insecurity that has led to right across the country. And we know that even with legal paperwork, with citizenship, right, with that is not often a protection from folks. Now we have a community of folks who are losing status, right, and are now left to navigate that complication on top of the increased enforcement efforts across the US, right? They now have to think through the additional step of, oh, what do I now have to do regarding driving my kids to school, right? Or the work authorization that I was relying on to do my job, to provide for my family, is no longer valid. How do I continue to make sure that my kids are fed, that we have a roof over our head, right? Like all these issues that, like I said, plague all of us day to day, right? Are now being escalated by the fact that now they're navigating being undocumented, right? And that's the reality, right? Like there's these new questions under conditions that are significantly worse, right? People now have to think about, make plans for what happens if I get picked up on a way back from work? What happens to my kids, right? Do I have to make family safety plans to figure out where my kids will be, who will take care of them? How do I make sure that any property I own, right, gets taken care of if I end up having to be deported, right? If I get caught, right, now as they're navigating undocumented status. Or as you mentioned, right, making plans to say, what is the legal options left to me or my family in this moment, right? Is there an asylum claim application that can be submitted, right? Is there some other form of legal relief that they can pursue that could provide some sort of certainty back into their life as they navigate these things, right? On top of that, people aren't giving up, right? People across the country are still showing up. I think there was this beautiful, powerful moment a couple of weeks ago before the Supreme Court, as there was the hearing regarding TPS for Haiti and Syria, where local community members, past TPS holders, and TPS holders currently, or folks who maybe have lost status, showed up to share the importance of TPS, right? Share what it means to be a member of this community, right? To celebrate the beautiful, rich culture and just benefit to that they've brought to the U.S. and the members of community have shown and been a part of, to celebrate that joy in resistance of what we're seeing, right? To remind everybody that these are people as well, right? These are your neighbors, your nurses, your teachers, anyone in your community, right, who've been a long part of your community many times. These are the folks that the administration is trying to get rid of, right? To recenter the reality that, like, we're talking 1.3 million people who are on their way out on losing status under this administration, right? Like the largest delegalization effort the US has ever seen, right? We're talking an astronomical amount of people. And each of those individuals has a story, right? Each of them has a family. Each of them has a community that they're a part of that is at risk at losing them under this administration, right? And those are stories that we want to continue to uplift and share with folks, right? We want to share the reality that this is not just a targeting of random folks, right? This is very intentional targeting of the administration of immigrant members of a community, right? And that's not something that we'll stand up for, right? We continue to fight back, right? And be with our community members in this moment as we say, it is not just showing up at the legal battles, right? CASA has lawsuits out on Cameroon, Afghanistan, Venezuela, right? There's organizations across the country that are suing the administration, right, as we've talked about, right? And while that legal battle continues and we continue to see what comes next, right, we're still showing up in other ways, right? Community members are still showing up, right? We're pushing to see what can we do to create new pathways for folks to adjust their status, right, at Congress. We're working at local community levels to say, what can we do to minimize the risks community members may face, whether it's ensuring that there's good data privacy laws to ensure that folks are not at risk of being profiled and tracked down by immigration enforcement agencies, or ensuring that they can trust in local enforcement agents to not be in collaboration with ICE, that local enforcement agents aren't doing the job of federal immigration, right? Using local tax money that could be benefiting members of the community to do the government's job, right? There's all these spaces where we can navigate protections and ensure that our community members are safe in this moment. And that's what we continue to do, right? Is showing up for folks in all those different levels in all those ways, on top of fighting the battles at Congress, at the Supreme Court, at our district courts, right? To really ensure that folks are protected, ensure that that safety and security that they deserve as members of our communities, right?
So on the topic of how our communities are organizing and rising up, Yanira, I want to ask you, since Alianza is a network built by and for migrant communities of Latin America and the Caribbean, what are TPS communities doing in response? What does the organizing look like, and how are people protecting each other and supporting each other?
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, information. The education is key in both ends, right? Education and information with our loved ones in our countries of origin, but also here among the TPS recipients, among allies, among elected officials, the media. So it goes across that important pillar of education, so in providing the clear information what's going on right now with TPS, trying to get the updates, including the most recent thing that we heard of in an interim final rule that it's putting in place the changes imposed by HR1, shortening the length of the validity of work authorizations for TPS holders, which is not only having an impact in the ability of those who continue to have a designation of ending in the next couple of months, affecting their ability for work and benefits. But so the correct information across the communities, it makes a difference not only to understand what's going on, but to see how can I be engaged if I am an ally, if I am a TPS holder, to the media as well. What are the things that the community needs to know in my reporting, or if I am an elected official? What are the things at hand that I can do? We are also taking the time to work emergency plans with the TPS families. And this is not by saying come and forcing the people to leave. No, just to think about them and triage the emergency things they need to keep in mind, just to make sure that an emergency plan is there if it's needed for anything that happens. So it's important to invest time. We've been investing in a space that we call Resistimos en Comunidad, we resist in community, with our organizational members to have those conversations so they can bring it, they can have it afterwards in their localities. We continue to to encourage our members to reach out to employers. Not all employers are confused about what's going on with TPS, and those who are confused, we try to stay closer so they know that as we see it, they are being forced to fire lawfully authorized workers. So again, information is being very important in this process. We are asking as well the TPS community and our organizations to document what's going on with all the changes impacting the TPS community, and also how the lack of information, the misinformation, the intentional misinformation is affecting the TPS families, employers, the economies in the local communities, making noise. It's been very important for us. At least we are seeing that it makes a difference when the local media in our countries of origin are using our narrative to explain what's really going on in the United States and with regards to TPS. Activating elected officials at the local level, it's been also important, just like Patrick mentioned, that rally that happened recently in DC outside of the Supreme Court. But we are also seeing that it's important that those stories, those conversations happen locally. So because what we're seeing in general, local elected officials are, the majority are not aware of everything that we're talking here. So we're hoping that afterwards this podcast is it's recorded, that localities share what we're discussing with their elected officials. And the last two things I'm going to say, that what we're doing is that asking, as Patrick said, to make sure Congress understands that they have an important role in seeking legislative solutions and insisting the community must organize, that we need to continue to be together, not to isolate, that we can navigate fear together and how we can transform that fear. Thanks to the solidarity and the love that allies and local communities are open to give to TPS holders.
That was beautiful, Janita. I personally love the image of transforming fear through community. And I think that's true all across the board right now for all immigrants, not just TPS holders, but immigrants, refugee, frankly, anybody that has come to this country, um, seeking safety, seeking better opportunities, is facing so much of this uncertainty as well. And it's a great reminder for us as we're nearing the end of our episode to think about that transformative power of coming together, standing in solidarity with our neighbors, with our allies, knowing that there is power in numbers, that our voices will always matter, and that in these social ties we can find the strength to get over these things, because we have always done it and we will continue to persevere through these adversities. So I want to end the episode by coming to what we are actually fighting for. What does a real solution look like? And what do you need from the people listening to this right now for all of us to get there? And I'll kick it to you, Janita.
Thank you, Isabel. I would say that let's work together to make sure the narrative of communities united prevail. That narrative is so important at the end of the day, because it can translate not only in the several things that Patrick and myself have shared, activating, being part, identifying solutions, but also narrative at the end of the day can translate into policies. So let's try to be visible on what's going on locally, even if a neighbor is not an expert on immigration policy, just to step up and say that I'm here for my neighbor, it makes a difference. And secondly, I would say that it is important, as we go closer to what we don't know what's going to happen in the next electoral cycle, that we come together as communities and imagine what we want. How do we want our communities to be, and to aspire that everyone in the United States can live in a dignified way. I would like to end saying, sharing a letter that we sent to the newly appointed DHS secretary, and we were outlining several issues that we're seeing happening, that maybe on the surface it looks like it's lack of updating some sites, but in the end, it has a big impact not only in the TPS community, it has an impact in several local agencies and communities. So I would end with that: education, solidarity, activating locally. It means a lot when someone is living in uncertainty.
Yeah, 100% echoing that sentiment, Samira, about the concerns about uncertainty, right? We always have known that temporary protected status was just that, right? It is a temporary status. But the reality is that that's not how it's been used in the last few years, right? We've had folks who've been here for 20 plus years. While this should be, we are hoping to continue to push to have the status exist, right? But we want to start talking about having folks create legal pathways for folks to adjust their status to meet the realities of the lives they've built here in the US, right? To give that opportunity to folks, that sense of security and stability back into their lives, right? We want to have folks call their members of Congress, reach out to their elected officials and say, we want to talk about lawful pathways for folks to adjust their status, right? Talk about legislation that provides that certainty, to provide that authorization, the ability to work, to provide for their families, to be to be something accessible for folks, right? Folks who have been members of our community, who've contributed to the economy, who've built a life here, right? To be truly have that opened up to them in a way that is no longer filled with doubt about what comes next in the next 18 months, the next 6 months, right? That concerns is something that we continue to fight, right? We'll continue to fight the administration on the effects that they're trying to terminate the current designations, right? But we want to push beyond that, right? That's not the end goal here for folks, right? We want folks to, like Yanira said, live with dignity that they deserve, right? Not have this fear in their lives constantly. That's what we continue to ask folks to reach out to in their members of Congress, right? This is a larger push, right, about cross immigration. We want a system that's fair, that's just, that treats people with human dignity, that provides them these realities that they need and provides relief to the realities that they're experiencing, right? A system that doesn't change, isn't prepared to meet the moment, is never going to be providing folks with the next steps that they need, and will never provide the relief that folks need to really become full members of the community in the ways that we would all deserve to be, right? So that's really pushing for folks in this moment to have those members with their neighbors, to uplift the stories of the folks that they know, and reach out to their members of Congress and say, hey, I want us to dream for more, right? Not only do we want to stop the attacks that we're seeing, but we want proactive visions of a better future, something that includes all of our community members, all of our neighbors in this moment.
Patrick, Janita, thank you so much for your time, for sharing about the work that you do and the resistance and the joy that you see in TPS communities. And thank you for leaving us with this beautiful message about pushing our legislators to dream of a better future that includes all of us. But above all, thank you so much for taking the time to humanize the plight of TPS holders, because this is not just a legal story unfolding with backs and forths and stays and terminations. This is the fate of 1.3 million people in the country. So thank you for sharing about the stories of the communities that you work with, about what that looks like, not just for the families in the US, but for families in their home countries and administrations in countries where they would be forced to as well. If you want to stay updated about future Refugee Matters episodes that we will have, please subscribe to We Are All America's newsletter and follow We Are All America, where we will announce upcoming episodes. Thanks so much for tuning in.